Hey guys, this is just a quick video on running an unpivot in SQL Server. So first of all, what is unpivot? So let's take a look at the data, and we'll head on over to my computer screen here, and we'll talk real quick about how this data is stored and then what it actually means to unpivot. So first of all, there's a whole lot of different ways of storing your data. Two of the ways that we'll talk about today is storing it in a wide format as opposed to a long format. So I've got two different tables here. Both of them are person tables. One is called person wide and one is called person long. So wide and long are two different types of ways to store data that we're going to talk about today. So in the wide format, what we have is we've got a table, and the way that the data is formatted is in such a way that all the attributes for a particular entity in that table are stored on the same row of data. So in other words, so we've got a person here, we've got Marley Barker, and by the way, this is all bogus data. I just created this data just a little while ago. So, but anyways, so for Marley Barker, all of her data in this table is stored on a single row of data. Now, if we wanted to add another attribute like another phone number or something like that, or an additional email address, what we would actually have to do in order to do that is we would actually add another column to this table and then store that data in that additional column that was added. But it would still all be on the same row of data. That's why it's called wide, because the more columns that or the more data that you want to store for a particular entity in that table, the wider it's going to get. So now the other way that we're talking about today is in a long format. So a long format is I guess if you're familiar with JSON or something like that, where in key value pairs, it's similar in concept anyway to like a key value pair. So, so in this situation, we've got this long table, and instead of storing it wide, it basically goes down in a long format. So, so we've got a key here of person ID and attribute name, and then the value is going to be her first name. And same thing, key of person ID and middle name, and as you can see, she doesn't have a middle name, so, and then last name is Barker, and same thing up here. So that's kind of the difference between the long format and the wide format. The wide format just goes out, and then the long format goes down essentially. Now there's pros and cons to either one. The long format can be a little bit more versatile in the sense that you don't actually have to edit or change the DDL in order to add additional values to a particular entity. All you have to do is insert another row, and there's a whole nother new attribute that you can add to that entity. So, but there's also caveats there. You know, it's a whole nother topic that we're not going to get into today. But just be aware that there's two. Well, there's actually a lot of different ways of storing data, but these are two that you can do. So, but anyways. Back to the topic at hand is what we are doing is we're doing an unpivot. So an unpivot is going to be a way of doing a select on this data in a wide format, and be able to produce a data set that looks just like this one here in the long format. So it's going to be all the same data. I'm just going to take this data from a wide format, and I'm going to produce a data set that is in long format. A lot of times you're going to be needing to do something like this if, say, you are doing an ETL conversion from one system to another. And in that ETL conversion, the new system is storing the data in a different format than the old system. So maybe it's in a wide format in the old system, and it's going to be in a long format in the new system. So something like that. There's a lot of different reasons you might be needing to do this, but anyways, we'll get into it. So what I did is I went ahead and created a template here. So this template is going to just guide us through doing the unpivot, and it just makes it really easy, makes it kind of destigmatizes the whole thing. So first of all, we're going to, so here's our unpivot, and we're going to pass something to this unpivot, and give it some parameters that it's going to use in order to perform the unpivot. And but the first thing that we need to do is define the data set that we're going to pass to the unpivot. So a lot of times what you can do is you can actually just say on line 60 here, you can just say from your table. So in this instance, it would actually be person-wide, right? Because that is the table that we want to unpivot. However, we're going to do it a little bit different, and I'll tell you why we're going to do that a little bit different in a little bit. Because what we're going to do is we're going to create an error later, but in order to avoid that error right now, we're actually going to put this into a subquery. So instead of just passing it the table, we're actually going to pass it a subquery that's going to create a data, that's going to generate a data set that we're going to pass to the unpivot. So we will do a subquery here that is select, and we're going to grab the person ID, and in this part we are not going to unpivot everything right off the bat. We're actually just going to take the name columns first, and then we'll add additional columns as we go. And again, I'll show you why we're going to do that. And so what we're going to do is do first name, middle name, and last name. Okay, so now we've got a data set that we're going to pass to the unpivot, and I can just execute this particular piece right here, and it'll return all the first names, middle names, and last names for all the people in the person-wide table. Now we'll go ahead and just skinny this down to specifically the one person that we're going to do right up front, and then we'll open it up and run it wide open for the entire thing after we've walked through the whole unpivot scenario. So we'll go ahead and just do equals 1. So where person ID equals 1. So here is Marley Barker. So at this stage in the game, what we've done is we've defined our data set that we're passing to the unpivot command. And that is this data set right here. And next, what we're going to do is we're going to continue to configure the rest of the unpivot statement. So the next piece of the statement that we're going to do is we're going to create or pass it the name of the column that is going to hold the actual attribute values. So remember, what we have here in this person long table, I'll go ahead and select from that again, we have a field called attribute value, and that is the field that actually holds the values of all the attributes. So we've got our attribute is first name, and first name is Marley, and Marley is stored in the attribute value column. So what we want to do is we want to mimic that same result. So what we're going to do here is the first thing that we pass to the unpivot is the name that we want to give to that column. Now this doesn't have to be called attribute value. It can be called anything you want it to be. You could call it George if you want to. However, I like to make sure that when we name things, we're going to go ahead and name it in some fashion that is meaningful to the data that's being stored in that column. So what we will do is, or I'm going to do anyway, you can do whatever you want. But me, I'm going to call this attribute value. And that is, again, just the name of the column that is going to hold the actual value of the columns that we are unpivoting. Now, we also, the next piece that we're going to pass to the unpivot is going to be the name of the column that is going to hold what was previously the column names. So remember, in our wide table, we had a column name of first name, middle name, last name, gender, mobile phone, and so on and so forth. We're going to turn those on its side, remember, and the column that is going to hold the names of what was previously the column names is going to be this column here. And I have named this attribute name. Again, you can call this whatever you want to, but we're going to call this attribute name. All right. And I spelled that wrong. attribute name. Now, the last piece that we're going to pass to the unpivot is going to be a list of the columns that we are actually unpivoting. So what we are doing is we are passing first name, middle name, and last name to the unpivot statement, and those are the values that we want to unpivot, right? So we're going to go ahead and just give a comma delimited list of those fields, and we'll go ahead and do that. All right. So now at this stage in the game, we can go ahead and execute this, and voila, there we go. So now what we have is we've turned this wide format of what used to be a first name column, a middle name column, and a last name column into just two single columns that are a key value pair. In this instance, the key is the person ID and the attribute, and the attribute name, and the value is the attribute value. Now, I don't like the way that the columns are actually ordered, and that is just because I did a select star, and that just happens to be the order of the columns that that SQL Server spits them out in when you do an unpivot. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to actually give it the actual column names that I wanted to select. So and I'm going to do attribute name first, and then attribute value. So now, if I execute this again, now I've got my key in the first two columns and my value in the last column. So that is, from a very high level, the act of performing an unpivot. So now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and let's say that we wanted to add the additional columns to our unpivot. So remember that our person-wide table here has other columns other than just the name columns, and we've got gender, mobile phone, address, we've got birthday, and so on and so forth. So let's say that we wanted to add birthday to our unpivot. So we want to, eventually we're going to do all the columns, but we're just kind of walking through this right now. So let's go ahead and just add birthday. And we are going to go ahead and add birthday to the list of columns. So there we go. So now our data set that we're passing to the unpivot statement contains 4 columns that we're going to be unpivoting. And we've also told the unpivot statement that we want to unpivot all 4 of those columns. So now if I go ahead and run this, let's see what happens. Womp womp. So basically what's happening here is we get an error message, and the error message is just telling us that the unpivot statement expects all the columns to be in the same data type. So, so basically what's happening here is we've got birthday, which happens to be a date column, or a date data type, and then we've got first, middle, and last name, which are all nvarchar something. I'm not sure. I think that's like 30 characters long or something like that. So that's what's happening. Is SQL Server gets the data. It says, I don't know what to do with this, and then it pukes on you. So, so what we need to do is we need to go ahead and do a cast or a convert on these columns that we are doing, and then so that way that the unpivot statement actually receives data in all the same format for all the columns that it's going to unpivot. Now let me show you something else here real quick before we fix this. Is let's take another column here. So we're going to take so gender. Gender is also an nvarchar. And so being an nvarchar, all the name columns are nvarchar, everything should be hunky-dory, right? So we'll go ahead and run this and try to execute this again. And oops, we get the same error message. Now, even though they have the same base data type, gender is a nvarchar 1, and first name, middle name, last name are all nvarchar 30 or something like that. So basically, even though they are both the same. They are all the same base data type. They all need to be exactly the same, as far as what you're returning there. So what we can do here is we can go ahead and we can do a convert. And in this conversion, we're going to go ahead and just make them all the same data type and all the same length. Okay, so now what's happening is we're returning 4 columns. They're all nvarchar 60, regardless of what their original data type was, and we're passing that to the unpivot. So now if we execute this, now everything works just perfectly as we expected. Now there's you just need to, now when it comes to doing data conversions and things like that, you also need to just be aware of how it works and how different data types convert to a character string. So there's a lot of caveats there. And that's something else that we can do is, instead of using an nvarchar, we can actually attempt to retain the same data type that it originally was by doing a SQL variant. Whoops. All right, and with a SQL variant is a SQL data type that is able to store data of multiple different types. Now there are caveats here too. We're not going to get too much into this stuff because that's actually a rabbit hole that we can spend a lot of time on. But for now, what we'll do is we'll just convert all this to a SQL variant and go ahead and run that. And now that also still works. So, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just add the remainder of the columns that we have in our wide table, and then we'll go ahead and finish our unpivot. So okay, so now what I did is I just edited our data set that we're passing to the unpivot. So now if I select just this statement inside here and execute that, now you'll see that we basically are returning the entire wide table for that particular person. So now what we need to do is we also need to make sure that we are telling the unpivot statement that we also want to unpivot the remainder of the columns that we're passing. So now we'll just add these down here. Okay, now we've gone ahead and added those. I misspelled address. There we go. So now what we can do is go ahead and just execute the unpivot statement, and what you'll see is that we have successfully unpivoted the entire set of data for that particular person from that table. So we've got, now remember we had all these different columns before, and now we just have 2 columns with all the data stored in these 2 columns. So basically moving it from a wide format to a long format. Now what we can do here also is we can go ahead and get rid of this filter and just run this wide open for the person wide table, and then you'll see that we have unpivoted the entire table. So here's our first person, person ID 1, has all the attributes for that person, and then next is person ID 2, and so on and so forth. So that is, from a high level, the concept of running an unpivot in SQL Server. So listen, if you enjoyed this video, if you found it helpful, go ahead and like and subscribe. Even if you didn't, go ahead and leave me a comment and let me know what I can do better. So that's pretty much it. Thanks, and have a great day.